Hey guys and gals, welcome back to Ferrigno Freedom Channel. Again, I'm Dante Ferrigno. I appreciate you coming back to check out another reaction video. This is an interesting video idea that I had because some things I've been going through in 2023 for myself is that I've had an increasing amount of stress in my life, really over the past couple of years. I'd say 3 years. I think all of us have had an increased amount of stress in our life, so I don't have to go into a lot of detail about what mine's been about. But I can tell you, changing jobs in 4 years when I worked on my last job for 10 years is a very unsettling thing when you're 51 years old and you support a family on your income. So it has been a bit stressful. And I've noticed that over 2023, I had some issues keeping the belly fat down. And I started to think about how the effects of cortisol might play a role in that. And I've learned a little bit of things about things like gluconeogenesis and how our body produces glucose from beef, or from protein rather, and that can increase our blood sugar levels and bring back the cortisol levels, as it also brings back insulin and things like that. But I still notice that I feel the stress. Now, I don't feel the anxiety that I used to feel. I don't feel that crushing, punishing feeling that keeps me not wanting to get out of bed like I used to before I was on this way of eating. That has all been a thing of the past. And even the depression issues that I used to have, like those crazy thoughts that used to come to my mind back when I was eating the standard American diet, those things are a thing of my past as well. About the only time I think I've exacerbated anything like that is when I've dabbled in stimulants that I'd gotten away from, whether it was nicotine, caffeine, or cannabis. Any one of those things really has a negative effect on me in the long run. They're all great when they're happening. You know, it feels like something is happening. I'm getting a boost from the energy from the caffeine. I'm getting a relaxed sensation from the nicotine. I'm getting a relaxed sensation from the cannabinoids. But in the long run, they tend to, it just bottles up everything for me and on all levels. And I tend to also want to overindulge in all of those things, whether it was nicotine or whatever. But anytime I have let those things creep back into my life, those have brought back some of those negative feelings and those negative thoughts. Now, I know a lot of people have some great things to say about all of these things, whether it's caffeine, nicotine, or cannabis. But for me, I have found that those are things that I just have to stay away from. But it doesn't eliminate the complete feeling that sometimes rides on someone's shoulders when they have a lot of responsibility. Having a family today is a lot of responsibility. It always has been. But when you're the sole breadwinner, I think that can play a big role too. And doesn't matter if I'm the sole breadwinner or not. I want to be able to be the leader in my family and guide us in the right direction and do the right things. And when I have to worry about whether or not I'm going to be able to pay my mortgage, those things can get in the way of me making good decisions and being able to think clearly, because that can turn into stress. So I wanted to check out this video by Thomas DeLauer, and I've watched a couple of videos of his. He's not my favorite influencer out there, but he's clearly doing something right because he's a physical, amazing specimen. So I'm sure he would be a good source for some information on how you can maintain the body the way you want. And if he's doing so well physically, he's probably got some good insights to offer on the stress side too. So let's take a look at what he's got to say. And do low carb diets increase cortisol, keto, and stress effects?
Ketosis has a very, very powerful effect when it comes down to stress. And stress has a very powerful effect when it comes down to ketosis. So understanding the relationship between the two is very, very important. But I do want to say that the focus of this video is to talk about how ketosis can truly help you modulate your cortisol levels and also modulate your stress levels. So let's get straight down into the scientific facts. All right, let's get to it. So the first thing that I want to talk about is blood sugar and the response with cortisol and stress when it comes down to our blood sugar. Now, this is going to make a lot of sense, so hear me out on it. Every single time we consume carbohydrates, it's broken down into glucose. This glucose triggers a response in the pancreas to secrete insulin. This insulin then takes that glucose and puts it into the cell. That's where it's burned for energy. Okay, so once insulin is released, our blood sugar drops. So then the next thing that the body does is it creates a hormone known as glucagon, and this glucagon releases carbohydrates that are stored in the muscles back into the bloodstream to keep the blood glucose supply level. So what I'm ultimately getting at is then we have this constant up and down swing of blood glucose it causes stress within the body. You see, every single time we have a rapid increase and decrease, our bodies end up secreting cortisol. And we know that cortisol is the stress response within the body. So yeah, believe it or not, eating carbohydrates and having these big fluctuations in blood glucose does actually stimulate your body to be in a stress state and produce more cortisol, which we all know is not necessarily a good thing. Now, when you're in ketosis, you're not having these big swings in insulin. You're not having these blood sugar swings because you're not consuming the carbohydrates and your insulin levels are nice and flatlined, or at least very, very subtle bumps.
Yeah, and that's something I'd like to point out real quick, because we've talked about this before. If you've been watching my channel for a while, just before I started doing the fasting experiment back in October, when I began the 8-week rolling 3-day fasts, I was surprised that when I checked my ketone levels, whether it was with a urine stick or with a blood stick, that I was not in ketosis, even though all I was eating was meat. I would have thought for sure that I was going to be in a constant state of ketosis, but very often when I would check the little stick, the urine stick, it would be negative. And when I would look at the ketone meter, it would be under 0.5, which I use the Keto Mojo Keto meter. And we have talked about that a lot when I was doing the fasting experiment. I haven't used it much since then, but I'm interested to check it again right now because I haven't thought about that in a while. But I was surprised to see that I was out of ketosis. Now, while I was fasting, I was getting into ketosis wonderfully. The question is now that I'm not fasting, how am I doing in that area? So that would be interesting to know. But I was surprised that I wasn't in ketosis. And I believe it was probably caused by the glucose that your liver produces when you consume protein. So I started to think maybe I'm eating too much protein and not enough fat. Maybe that, I just need to swap the ratios around a little bit. I don't like to think about things like that when it comes to a diet like this, because for the most part, we just ate when we could, back when you were hunting for it yourself and you had to gather all your own food that way. It wasn't like they were watching macros 1,000 years ago. They were just making sure they got something to eat. And if they could get as much meat and fat as they could, they were happy, which is pretty much the way I live on this carnivore way of eating that I've been doing, known as the lion diet. But like I say, I was surprised to see I wasn't in ketosis. So, and he's saying that they have an inverse relationship, ketones and cortisone, not cortisone, cortisol. Cortisol is your stress hormone. So I'm interested to hear how this plays out. Let me back it up just a little bit.
Not having these big swings in insulin. You're not having these blood sugar swings,
right,
because you're not consuming the carbohydrates and your insulin levels are nice and flatlined, or at least very, very subtle bumps. You're not having the big swings. So that right then and there has a major effect on cortisol. Now, having a positive effect on cortisol is one thing, but it goes a lot further than that. Let's start talking about the next thing that ketosis does when it comes down to managing stress, not just within your body, but also within your mind. And that leads me into gamma-aminobutyric acid, also known as GABA. You've probably heard of GABA before, at least heard of it spoken as a supplement that you can buy. But a lot of people don't realize that the body already creates it, and it's a very delicate process within the body. See, when it comes down to mental focus, when it comes down to clarity, when it comes down to sharpness, and when it comes down to just feeling nice and calm and relaxed and efficient, it's a delicate balance between what is called glutamate and GABA. You see, glutamate can actually turn into GABA. So let me make sure that all of this makes sense. Ketone bodies that are released when you are in ketosis encourage the conversion of glutamate to gamma-aminobutyric acid. Why does this matter and why is this important? Because it's that delicate balance between those two that allow us to be focused. For example, glutamate is very excitatory. Glutamate is a stimulant. Glutamate encourages more stimulus and it causes our brain to be really crazy and wired. It's needed sometimes and it's needed under times of stress, but we don't want it all the time because it can ultimately make us feel anxious and have a lot of brain fog. Now, gamma-aminobutyric acid is the opposite. It promotes relaxation, okay? It turns off the stimulation. Now, glutamate turns into GABA, but we don't want it all to turn into GABA, we just want it to be balanced. So if we have glutamate levels here and GABA levels here, we're anxious, we have brain fog, and we're stressed out. But if we can take some of that glutamate and convert it to GABA and get us nice and balanced, then we're right where we should be. We're even keeled, we're homeostasis, we're where we want to be. Ketones, like when you're in ketosis, promote the synthesis of glutamate to GABA. They bring you to that balanced state. And that's extremely, extremely, extremely important because...
Okay. I know it's extremely important. We'll get to because in just a moment. Okay, so he was saying if you're not getting into ketosis, then that's not going to cause the glutamate to produce GABA or to increase the GABA level so that you even out. And the fact that I wasn't in ketosis a lot during 2023, or the times that I checked during 2023, aside from my experiment with fasting where I was getting into great states of ketosis. So if I'm not getting into ketosis, it could be actually increasing my stress. But if I'm only eating meat, what would be causing me not to get in ketosis other than protein being synthesized into glucose in your liver, which is a natural function. I know gluconeogenesis isn't our enemy. I don't know. Let's see if he gets into it.
They bring you to that balanced state. And that's extremely, extremely, extremely important because if you are not in that state, you are even more stressed out and it turns into this vicious circle where it causes more of a cortisol response and can cause a serious problem within the body. The two things that I mentioned on how ketosis affects stress are great, but we also have to understand how stress can inversely have an effect on ketosis. You see, when you're stressed out, you produce cortisol. We know this by now. Cortisol is not all bad. It has some good properties. In fact, it actually does quite literally burn fat, but the problem is that it stores visceral fat, which is going to be the belly fat that we don't want. So that's never a good thing. But when we're in ketosis, we want to make sure that we're keeping our insulin levels nice and low. So what ends up happening when we get stressed out? Well, when we get stressed out, this increase in cortisol encourages the body to break down proteins through a process known as gluconeogenesis. When we break down proteins through gluconeogenesis, we create sugar from protein. So that means when you're in ketosis and you're doing your best to stay nice and stress-free, and you're trying to feel good, and you're keeping carbs out of the equation, but then you do get stressed out, it's going to cause the cortisol levels to elevate, which are thereby going to recruit protein to turn into sugar, which can kick you out of ketosis. So it's very important that you stick very strict to your ketogenic regimen so that your GABA levels are nice and so that your insulin levels are low, so you don't have any instance of stress beyond what you already have with your daily life.
To me, that answers a lot for me right now, because I've had people ask me, why are you not in ketosis if all you're eating is meat? And I have been under a good bit of stress as far as the pressure to perform, the pressure to provide for my family, to make sure that our bills are paid, because I'm the sole breadwinner for our household. And I don't like to put that stress onto my family. So I keep a lot of that to myself, and I just focus on what I need to do. And I don't know what I would do without the channel the support that you guys have brought to me here on YouTube and on Rumble and Odysee, where I have all my videos available. You guys have really made it a lot easier to deal with some of the difficulties I've gone through since leaving my profession back in 2021, technically. 2021 was when I left. And trying to start over again. And I just figured I've always made it. I've always been able to do it whatever needed to be done. So I kind of counted on my ability to get out here and do it. I didn't anticipate I would be changing jobs 4 times since I've moved down here. But those things definitely had a stressful effect on me. And especially as my job that I started, the most recent job that I left, back in 2023 when I started, it was great money. The first couple of months, I was like, this will pay the bills. I'm glad with that. That's all I need. But then it dropped off, and it was down to half of that, less than half of that in some cases. And then they had supposedly a spike in business during the summer, but I didn't notice a huge difference. I mean, it was much less than what it was when I first started. And I was trying to stick it out and hopefully that this place was going to get going better or do something better, and it just wasn't working in that direction. And then I finally decided that I gotta change jobs, and I got an offer to go work at another place where the manager, the owner of this business, had another successful business like this, and that the people that were going to be hired in the position that I'm going to be hired into were making a decent living. If I could make half of what she said her best people make, I would pay my bills, and that's all I was hoping for. But then that didn't start in November like it was supposed to 10 days after I quit my last job. I figured I'd take some time off for Thanksgiving for the family, and then I would be able to start this new job. Well, November came and went, and then December started. And then we were looking at the early December, then mid-December, then late December, then early January, then mid-January. And now here it is, the 15th of January, and I still haven't started. So that definitely has been weighing on me, but it hasn't been producing anxiety like it used to in my life. I've been able to address the problem a little bit better. I don't yell at my wife about it or get upset with her. I do get upset sometimes, but I let her know that I'm not upset with her. I'm just frustrated at what's going on. And I know you guys have this too, because you're just as human as I am, and we're all facing the difficulties of this world. And ever since 2020, it seems like everything's been turned up to level 20 on that increased difficulty for us to all deal with. So it's tough. It's tough, and I can definitely feel it. But when he pointed out that the stress itself can have an effect on causing the gluconeogenesis to basically, it's going to recruit the liver to start producing more sugar, which is going to take me out of ketosis, which is going to increase the stress level. And I definitely noticed that over the holidays.
Because stress will cause the body to break down protein into sugars. We have to be careful of that. So make sure you're paying attention, make sure you're meditating, make sure you're doing what you can to modulate stress as much as possible in your life on top of what keto already does for you.
Now, I don't meditate, but I do pray. But I notice sometimes when I'm praying that I'll get into my thoughts as I'm talking to the Lord about my issues, and I'll find myself thinking only about the issues and no longer praying. So it can be difficult sometimes to find that quiet moment enough to actually sit and do those things. But I definitely believe it can be done. And it's just something that I guess I need to focus on a little bit stronger.
Lastly, I want to reference a study that helps you understand why ketosis might also help stress from an oxidative level at the cellular level. The Journal of Neuroscience published a study that took a look at the effect of ketones on the mitochondria when it comes down to reactive oxygen species. You see, whenever we go through any kind of metabolism or creating energy in the mitochondria, there's a fair amount of what is called reactive oxygen species, also known as oxidative stress more commonly. This reactive oxygen species is very stressful on the body. It causes glutathione to have to secrete, it causes all kinds of things to have to be released just to neutralize those free radicals. Well, what we've found is that ketosis enhances cellular respiration within the mitochondria. So this mitochondrial respiration means that it is more efficiently utilizing oxygen. Therefore, you're not having so much excess oxygen that is going around and oxidizing other things, causing oxidative stress. You see the common denominator here being oxygen, oxidative stress. So when we're reducing that, we reduce the stress, again, oxidative stress on the body, which reduces the overall stress on the body, which reduces the cortisol response, which therefore reduces gluconeogenesis, which reduces the sugars in the bloodstream that would kick you out of ketosis. I know that was a mouthful. I know that was a lot to comprehend.
It is.
But if you have to, rewind the last 1 minute and watch it again, because it's going to make a lot of sense once you really, really listen to it. In short, ketosis is going to help you manage your stress. It's proven to do so. Beta-hydroxybutyrate is a powerful ketone body that can cross through the blood-brain barrier and give you a lot of mental clarity and a lot of focus, but you have to make sure you're strict in order to get the benefits that I dished out in this video.
Well, there you have it. Keep it strict. And that's something I didn't do a whole lot of while I was working at the restaurant, because I was eating a lot of things that had some sugar, like bacon and sausage, because I had provided meals and things like that. And that definitely allowed some sugar to get back into my diet. It also was outside of my normal meat style eating. For those of you who don't know what lion diet is, a ruminant meat, water and salt diet. Ruminant animals are the animals that have multi-chambered stomachs that are designed to remove all the toxins from the vegetables that they eat and the food that they eat in general, because they are vegetarian. It's going to remove all those plant toxins. But when you eat things like chicken and pork, these monogastric animals that don't have that ability to remove the toxins from their food, those toxins wind up in the meat, and that meat can have an effect on you. In my case, I found that I'm extremely sensitive to the things in animal foods that are not ruminant animals, and I have an extreme response to just about anything that involves vegetation. So having the wrong kind of meats, having the cured meats because it was bacon occasionally, even incorporating eggs could have a factor to play in there. Now, there's a lot of great things that people say about eggs, but last year I started eating a lot more eggs than I used to because, again, it was provided. Occasionally, they would even provide me with a steak every once in a while. But then I found out later on that they were using vegetable oil to grease the grill. So I was getting a lot of things in my system in 2023 that I wasn't used to. And he was talking about how important it is to stay strict. I have found it very easy to generally stay strict when I'm controlling all of the sources of where my food's coming from. And that is a very difficult thing to sometimes do because you only have so much time in a day. And if you're like I was, you're not familiar with making food anyway. That was something I had to start from scratch. I mean, I was shop at the restaurant, buy it from or get it from my workplace type of guy all my life. Whenever they provided food, I never turned down free food. And then if I was going to get something to eat, I was usually in a hurry. So a lot of times I was going by Hardee's, picking up maybe even a low carb burger, but I wasn't always leaving off the ketchup and the mayonnaise and the things that I thought were, not too bad because I wasn't eating the bread, but it was just basically making excuses. And a lot of times last year, I found that I was making excuses because I was worried about the income that I was having. And if I could save a little bit of money by eating the food that they were providing, it kind of helped. But if I'm already having an increased stress level and I'm eating some of the foods that I shouldn't be eating, that seems to be a recipe for continuing to increase the problem where I'm going into too much gluconeogenesis. I'm producing too much glucose that's causing me to be out of ketosis and not get those full benefits that I was getting. I saw some great benefits in ketosis on the ketosis side when it came to fasting during my fasting experiment. But then I also noticed when I got some recent blood work back, and I haven't had a chance to talk to my doctor about it yet because I want to be able to get a kind of a look at this before I go into a lot of detail on it. But I noticed that my TSH was still even more elevated than it was the last time I saw it, into the high area. Used to be, before that, it was just in the high normal area. Then I've heard something about fasting having a negative effect on the thyroid. And I thought, well, maybe I didn't do myself as many favors as I thought with the fasting. So there's still a lot of questions to be answered. But probably the most important thing I can take from that is staying strict on the way of eating that you're doing. If you're getting the carbohydrates out of your life, if you're keeping the sugar out of your life, you've got to keep it out 100%. And then also the other thing he said is about focusing on what helps you keep from being stressed. For me, that's studying scripture and prayer and being able to spend time with my family and doing similar things, studying scripture together or praying. I'm not much of a meditator guy where I'm going to be doing something where I'm sitting there making noises or whatever. I know other people find that to be relaxing. I don't find it to be relaxing at all. As a matter of fact, I feel like I'm wasting my time. So anyway, keeping the stress down, staying strict on the diet, these things are definitely going to be something that I'm going to be incorporating more as 2024 is starting off, because I still got just as much bills to pay as I did last year, and I still got just as many challenges ahead of me. I still haven't started my new job. I'm hoping to start it this Wednesday, but we'll see how that goes, because it'll be like the 5th or 6th time that I was expecting to start. And it can be difficult. So all I can say is I ask for you guys' prayers. I'm praying for you guys because I want you guys to be healthy and happy too. We're all going to face difficulty in this world. Adversity is inevitable, but stress is optional. You've just got to keep it under control with the right means and the right diet. At least that's what I think. Anyway, I'll see you guys next time. Have a good one.
If we pay extra, could we maybe get some grease or fat?
One of the things I do to fight back against big food and big pharma is to recommend companies that make animal-based products that are good for our bodies and good for our skin. In this case, I'm talking about Vintage Tradition. Vintage Tradition tallow balms are a go-to for me now, especially the unscented one. I like it because it doesn't have anything extra in it other than extra virgin olive oil and tallow rendered from suet. This is the interior fat, also called suet or kidney fat. For the tallow they use making the tallow balm, highly saturated and therefore more therapeutic than any other. They don't use any trim fat or any other fats besides suet. So if you want some ancestrally appropriate skincare products that are going to help support the carnivore movement, head over to vintagetradition.com and use my discount code DANTE, D-A-N-T-E, to save 10% on your order. I promise you won't regret it. Their products are fantastic. I love them and I use them all the time.